Hey guys, it's Gary back again. Cheers. Coffee. I made a promise that I already broke. That basically every time having never had a coffee maker before at home, being quite a fan of coffee, I bought one recently, and I said, okay, well, every time I make a pot of coffee, I'm going to make a video. I've already kind of broke that promise. I think the last pot I did, I didn't do a video for whatever reason. I forget what was going on at the time. And honestly, I don't know how ready I am today, and I don't know how loud the music is. Hold on a second. It's always hard to get the right balance because what I hear and what comes out on the video are two different things. But anyway, I made a pot of coffee. I didn't want to break my promise. Although I'm not really ready to make a video, I decided to do one anyway. Put the coffee down. Today, I'm going to show a oddball collection of things from, I don't know, I don't know when I started buying these. Basically bought most of these in the same time period. When CDs came around, late 80s, I was a fan right away. And I love the medium, just like people like vinyl. So I actually got excited about having a huge collection and started buying things, sometimes because they were just on CD. But also, I hadn't indulged, prior to the CD era, I'd bought some ethnic music albums, but not a whole lot. Since I was working at the time, I got into a bit of a funk or rhythm, and whatever you want to call it, with buying some more traditional music type CDs without knowing a great deal about it. And I guess at that point I had discovered, a lot of the jazz artists and ECM and all that, and the electronic music artists. So even though they all have plenty of albums to collect on CD, I also decided that I wanted to branch out and buy things that I was maybe less familiar with, but was interested in. And one thing I have always loved, and not actually been exposed to a whole hell of a lot of it, is the more traditional instruments in both Chinese and Japanese music. I think one of the reasons I like them is because they're different sounding. You can like avant-garde music, and you can like jazz or rock or whatever, but it's all pretty much Western instruments. It's keyboards and pianos and guitars and drums and a lot of instruments that we're all very familiar with. And on occasion, when I would maybe see something on television or a movie soundtrack or something like that, I'd often hone in on the music and realize that pretty much for a lot of my life, I didn't come across a lot of necessarily Chinese or Japanese soundtracks, but when I did, I realized how truly atmospheric the music is, and how different when I heard it, it was initially almost always during movie soundtracks. But it was always apparent to me that how different your perception of the movie would be if it had a traditional, orchestral score, as in Western style classical music score, versus the use of traditional Chinese and Japanese instruments, specifically stringed instruments, even though actually, obviously a lot of Japanese and even Chinese music uses flutes as well. But the one thing that I always was drawn to, maybe it's because of my love of guitar, I don't know, I love the string sounds. And all the stringed instruments are interesting because they don't kind of have the sustain that like a traditional guitar does, or a lot of violin or that kind of thing. A lot of the stringed instruments have a very short duration in terms of how long the sound lasts. The sound fades very quickly. So, you know, you have different techniques and a lot of fast picking that they use on those instruments. And a lot of the Chinese specifically instruments, but Japanese instruments as well, a lot of their stringed instruments are not made to play chords on, believe it or not, like you would a guitar or a lute or something like that, but rather they're played as single note instruments. And it's very interesting that a lot of the traditional music, despite the fact that the instruments aren't used in a chordal harmonic sense, a lot of the instruments nonetheless, even though they're playing single notes, have a lot of music written for them, traditional music, that has the instruments appearing in solo, without a lot of accompaniment, or in a lot of cases without any accompaniment. So here you have a single instrument, a stringed instrument in a lot of cases. You don't play chords on it, you play single notes at a time, and yet a lot of this music is written for the solo instrument. Well, that leads, I mean, imagine somebody playing, God, I can't think of a comparable Western instrument, really. But, you know, an instrument like that where you're playing basically one note at a time, and yet in a solo context, there's a lot of space, a lot of acoustic space left over. It's not a full sound, it's not an orchestral sound, there's not necessarily a backing, and even when there is backing, a lot of times the backing is very minimal as well. Sometimes there'll be another stringed instrument that's playing only single notes at a time. So even with an accompaniment or even a flute, but even with accompaniment, there's not a big full sound. And I guess my initial interest in this was coming from movies, but if you ever watch a movie, either a Japanese or a Chinese movie, where they've got a traditionally oriented soundtrack, it seems like a lot of the scenes in a movie where a new scene starts and you see a horizon, or, you know, a building in the horizon, there's not, you know, action or people going on, or the sun going down, or the hills or mountains or something like that. Those are the best scenes, because those are the ones that, even though movie-wise there's no action going on in terms of the story, those scenic things tend to be the ones that have the really great music moments to them. And I think it's seeing those, and seeing like the sun coming up over a hill or something like that, where they would naturally dub in some music. Those were the things that really got me interested in more traditional music, because you would really get the flavor of the music there. Scenically, there's not a lot going on. You're not following a story at that point. So I had a few albums. You know, I didn't pull my vinyl. I should have. And let me grab some more coffee. I've got this thing in my throat ever since winter started, and I think it's from the dry heat. I'm not sure. And I've been coughing now for like 3 weeks. So anyway, once the CD era came around, I came across a series, and, you know, I haven't pulled out and listened to most of these in years. I've listened to some of these recently, but I kind of had these all stored with my classical music in my old house before I moved, and they were kind of in they weren't in my bedroom. My main CD collection was in my bedroom, but I couldn't fit all my CDs in there, so I actually had a whole bunch of CDs on another floor, mostly my classical stuff, and I didn't get down there to pull them a lot. But I went through this period, and this series, and I get interested in series, in case you haven't noticed. Sometimes I like a compilation series, like the ECM Works series, the Compact Jazz collections that were from Verve Records. There's a few different, for whatever reason, I get interested in these series, and I like to collect the series, which is silly just for the series' sake, but whatever. And I came across this one on this label. I think the label is, well, you know, it's got King Records, This is about 1990 or 91 that I discovered these. Seven Seas Records. You know, these have multiple record companies. I'm not even sure which is the actual record company, because most of the things are in, well, Japanese. The first batch is Japanese. And I came across these series, and I bought one, and then I started buying others. These are Japanese imports. And this is a very interesting series. Japanese traditional music. The Shamisen 1, which is more, that's volume 1. And these are, you can see in the back what the instrument is. So it appears to be a 3-stringed instrument. I believe there may be instances where this one is strummed on occasion. For the most part, you're playing single notes. This was an interesting series. Bought this in the early 90s. I'm not sure which the first one was. Let me open them up. The packaging is really incredible. As I guess, well, Japan always does. It's got the obi, like the obi strip, but it's actually attached, which is very cool. It's actually attached to the back cover. That's very cool on all of these. So it looks like an obi strip that comes off, but it doesn't come off. And what it does is it's actually a flap where you pull out the CD. This is a nice cardboard case with the etching on there. You see the instrument in the back. I want to say the one thing about this series is it's almost very academic in terms of it features the instrument. Here's the actual CD case. It features the instrument, but for the most part, there's no accompaniment. And most of these instruments, now I'm actually filming this during the day. It's very rare that I do a video during the day, so now you have the glare to deal with. And I'm probably going to sleep right after I finish this video. But if you actually, if you can hear the background, you hear a rare instance of some strumming of one of these instruments. That one happens to be Chinese. We're looking at Japanese stuff right now. So there's the Shamisen thing, and if you could read it, there's very little in English on here. And I was kind of surprised that these got released over here in America by CD. Early 90s. The series came out in 1990. I bought these shortly after they were released. I can imagine I was the only one buying them. Probably. Nice booklet that comes with it too. Huge booklet. Quite a few pages in there. It's a nice package. And they're all like this. Everyone in the series is like it. Unfortunately, mostly it's in Japanese. You know, I don't recall right now. I don't see. There's a whole little like history in here, not just of the particular instrument that's featured on this volume, but of some Chinese traditional classical music, whatever you want to call it. See a lot of the traditional instruments, not just the one that's featured on the CD. Here's some percussion instruments that are traditional. You know, this stuff, if you're fairly adventurous, is not really hard to get into. Of course, I would never be able to play this at work because I think a lot of people would just be like, what the hell are you listening to? But I think, you know, for most people in the VC, certainly people I can listen to free jazz, this would not be difficult to listen to. Yeah, see, unfortunately, this entire booklet is in Japanese. This is the Japanese series. I'm getting confused here with it because I'm playing Chinese in the background, but this one is Japanese. The second booklet, the one that comes with the CD, another booklet. I love how they package these things, but again, everything is in Japanese. These apparently were not, with no translation, these apparently were not made at all. with America and English-speaking countries in mind, and I wonder who thought to import these to send these over here. I'm glad they did. Hell of a package. And every single one of them in this series comes in these cardboard outer cases and resealable flaps, things, whatever you want to call them. And they're it's really nice to have. And as a result, all these years that I've had these, they've stayed in immaculate condition. And I like the idea of them. Shamisen 1, Japanese traditional music. I wonder if these are still around. Like I said, most of them, unlike if you just go out and buy traditional Chinese or Japanese music in a lot of cases, you will get a large proportion of them will have accompaniment of other instruments, usually more in the background. But a lot of these, in this series anyway, feature really just the instrument solo. Maybe a little bit harder to get into. You have to be in the mood for them. But strangely enough, once I put one on, I kind of do get in the mood, and I want to listen to several. Here's another in the series, Biwa, another Japanese traditional. The same packaging, the outer cardboard. There's a booklet in here, 2 booklets actually. The one in the CD case. Another stringed instrument, very interesting looking stringed instrument. Would I love to be able to play one of these, to get my hands on one? And you can bet I would record. I'd find a way to record a piece around it. I imagine these would be to get one that's playable, that's not a piece of junk, would probably be very expensive. But I just love the sound and the space in there. I think people are not necessarily used to music with a lot of acoustic space that's not, the background's not filled in with harmonic stuff and nice full sound. But I like, but I really do. I dig, I dig the sparser stuff, Even though in these, even though it's in a lot of cases they're solo instruments, they get kind of frantic at times. Here's one I should have actually put this on. Now that I look at it, this looks like despite the fact it's just called So, Japanese traditional music. It looks like it's a kind of kodo, actually. And kodo is one of those stringed instruments that lays flat on the table like you see there, and you pluck the individual strings. And that's a fairly well-known instrument to people that even aren't real familiar with Japanese music. Actually, even in the smooth jazz group Hiroshima, that's I think the main ethnic music Japanese instrument that they use on their tunes. That's like a smooth jazz thing, but you hear this plucked sound in a lot of Hiroshima's music. And they're California-based band, but that's a kodo of some type or other that they use. It's not I'm sure it's a kodo. It's definitely in that family. It's a fairly large instrument with a lot of strings, and it lays on a table just as you see there, and you pluck it. I love the sound of those things. And I don't know what So necessarily refers to. I do see that there's mostly kodos listed here, but not just kodos. The kodo was brought from China as one of the 2 instruments used in gagaku. Established. I get it might be a particular style of kodo playing. That may be what that title refers to. Kodo is a lovely sounding instrument, by the way. One of my favorite of the traditional instruments. here's one of just traditional Japanese percussion. And this is an interesting one because there's obviously more than one instrument. There's a whole bunch of different. None of them are really comparable to the kind of Western drums that we're familiar with. Though most people have seen at least some of the large scale drumming that goes on in Japanese traditional, even in just TV shows and things. Here's one of the drums on a stand, and these drums can be enormous, and they're played with these huge sticks that you're holding in your hands. They're not like regular drumsticks, more like pipes. And you see, actually, I think Kitaro, I want to say Kitaro, actually used to bring one of these drums with him on his tours and have a section of his show where he would stand in front of the drum on a stand like that and do this 5-minute or so traditional drum piece using just acoustic percussion. Actually went to I think it was Carnegie Hall the only time I went there that I can recall, and so a traditional Japanese drum troupe. And so they have a lot of these big ass drums. But oddly enough, when I think of percussion in Japanese music, that's not what I think of as much, because they do have a lot of light percussion instruments. Again, here's the CD with its own booklet, another separate booklet inside. And I pulled this one out just because, again, it's all in Japanese. Lovely stuff. Just show a couple of the pictures of the various drums that they use. Very cool stuff. I'm hoping the second CD there is going to play. I don't know why. I don't think the second CD is going to play. I always have this problem with this player. Oh, it is playing. Okay. Obviously not percussion instruments, but I guess they're showing others. I wish I could, read. Yeah, they're showing the shamisen, which I showed earlier. Here's some more percussion instruments. Those look like they're metallic, though. But this is more traditional. You see the drum on the stand there. That kind of thing is the thing that they play. It's an interesting CD, but you have to be in the mood for it. And again, there's even with all the frantic drumming that sometimes goes on, there's a kind of acoustic space in the music where it's not everything is as full and busy all the time as you're used to hearing in Western music. And I must have bought this series within a short amount of time. I just got in this funk where I wanted to hear this stuff, and I started picking up a lot of these. I actually bought this one at Tower Records. Probably where I bought the others as well. No, they got different stickers on them. There's another series. Looks like it's distributed by the same company, though. 7 Seas. I couldn't get enough. Even though this series isn't specific to highlighting a single instrument, but a series called The Music of Japanese People, a collection of unique musical instruments. And again, they got these funky cardboard covers, CD inside. CD. This one doesn't have a separate booklet inside. It's only got the one booklet, which is huge, though. That's inside the actual CD jewel case. It's a CD. I love the artwork and the way they do the red on their labels. Let's see if there's a translation in the booklet. I kind of have my doubts. No. No translation in the booklet. But this is more of a collection. I think instead of focusing on one instrument, they do numerous instruments throughout. And I sure wish they would have done a translation, but I'm always curious about how many copies they were able to sell of something like this in this country. Where I don't even know that the Japanese and the Chinese people that would be more familiar with this music would necessarily be buying a lot of this. I think it's more like ethnomusicologists, if that's the correct terminology, and people that study world musics. They're probably pretty much all college professors that are buying these CDs, and then me, of course. Some great, even though I wish I could read this, these books are so thick. There's so much information in here. Unfortunately, all in Japanese. There's some Kodo-ish instruments. You can see how large some of them get. There would be an evening's worth of reading in here. These booklets have a ton, and it's just too bad that there's not. Hey, look at this one does have a translation, but not until page 20. I don't think all the stuff that was in the previous 19 pages is translated, but this one, unlike the other series, actually has some notes in English, which is nice. I don't recall that. I haven't pulled these out for quite a while. Now this CD is a lot quieter. And the first CD I was playing was Chinese music. Actually, this one is as well. So I'm showing Japanese stuff when I'm playing Chinese stuff. Yeah, unfortunately, they don't translate. They translate about 7 pages of information into English out of the 19 that are in Japanese, unfortunately. But at least it's something. I can't get the booklet back in. That's one thing, is sometimes when you get these nice thick booklets, you can't get them back into the cases very easy. Yipes. I like these outer cardboard things, though, especially if you can manage to keep them in good condition. Got a couple more. One I bought called Japanese Work Songs, again in the Music of Japanese People series. This one I wasn't so much into. I didn't know what work songs referred to. I bought this in '94 apparently. But it's actually vocal work songs, like traditional things that the workers, I guess in the fields or whatever, would sing. So it's mostly vocal songs that I recall. And it's not really what I was looking for so much. I'm more of an instrumental guy, But again, another very thick book. So I guess these are songs that various work people would sing. Yes, it's all in Japanese. Again, 19 pages of Japanese, but we do get some English writing finally. That's not really focusing. But not much. This is, let me see, a boat rowing song. Okay, these are the kind of work songs that are on here. A net pulling song, so this would be mostly for fishermen. A herring hauling song, again fishermen. Shaking off herring eggs. And it looks like it's all vocal music. I'm not seeing any instrument. I don't recall there being really many instruments in here. So songs that people would sing specifically during certain times, certain seasons of years. There's a spring work song, an autumn work song, cutting branches off of a log song, road horse charge song, bear hunting song, tamping a railroad track ground song, pulling an oar, as in rowing a boat rowing song, a road horse man's song along the Kampira Highway. Get very specific about what some of these songs were used for. Wow. Hauling herring again. Very interesting. This one being a vocal thing, which I didn't realize that I didn't really know what work songs referred to. But it's interesting. They have very specific songs for very specific duties, apparently. And it's a part of a culture that really is gone now too. I mean, I don't even know to what extent people in Japan are familiar with this stuff anymore. Here's one called The Music of Amami. Music of Japanese People. I haven't pulled these out for a long time. Cool cover though. Folk Songs of the Amami Islands and an August Dance. The folk songs of Amami may be said to be #1 in Japan in terms of its energetic and refined expression, both essential to folk music. Beautiful melodies played rhythmically on the shamisen and sung in falsettos on the high vocal range. So this would be shamisen, one of those traditional stringed instruments, as well as vocals accompaniment. You know, the funny thing is I make these videos and then I end up spending a lot of time listening to the music. I know I'd do it ass backwards. Again, there's a lot of credits in Japanese. This one's a little bit better though. The English starts on page 15 on these. So there's actually probably some more translated stuff on this one than the others. Yeah, it's interesting. You know, I'm always wondering how many folks that aren't college professors would listen to this stuff. I don't know. But you know what? If there's anybody around that would listen to it that isn't a professional ethnomusicologist, it would probably be some folks somewhere in the VC. So this seems like this is more vocal and with instrumental accompaniment songs. Yeah, I'm trying to vocal and sushin, vocal and sanshin. So there's some instruments here I'm not even familiar with. Here's one again, same series, Music of Japanese People, jam session of Tsugara Shamisen. Shamisen. So this has shamisen and shakuhachi, the flute, and percussion. So this one is maybe a little bit less academic. Well, that might not be the case really. But some more maybe instrumental combinations. In terms of, you've got some flute, you've got some of the stringed instrument stuff going on that I always associate with Chinese and Japanese music both. Shamisen and some percussion actually even. So this would be. I remember liking this one being the most repeatable. Again, the notes are in Japanese, but there are still quite a bit of this one actually is in English. So it's all percussion, shakuhachi, and shamisen. And Yazkaz plays percussion. Yazkaz is a guy, I don't know, I've got a couple solo releases by him. He's a very, very interesting percussionist, and I will find at least the one CD I have by him. And I don't know if he was living in America at some point, but I know his CDs were getting released here. Or a couple of his CDs, Yazkaz, that were pretty much percussion-based, if not entirely percussion, but not traditional music. It was original music that he was writing and doing overdubs. So the music has a fuller sound than the traditional Japanese music would be. He's not, I didn't realize until I got this that he's actually a traditional music performer as well, as a kind of creative, modern, avant-garde. And I'm wondering if anybody knows Yazkaz. If you're a percussion fan, you might have, because some of his stuff was even considered new age. He would do solo albums of multiple percussion overdubs. Very interesting stuff, very good stuff. And I will find my Yazkaz CD and I will show it. Is that it for the Japanese stuff? I think that's it for the Japanese stuff. Now, coincidentally, I also have, because there's similar instruments in Chinese music, both the flutes and the stringed instruments at the same time I was picking up various things. Now this is None Such Explorer series, that's very famous. Music of the Pipa, or Pipa, P-I-P-A, one of the most popular Chinese instruments, and this is an American release, so any liner notes in here are actually in English. And a little bit of, these are good also. Some of these are a little hard to get into because the Pipa, or Pipa specifically, there's a lot of albums like this one that there's no accompaniment. It's just solo, the solo instrument. So I like it, but it's there's no variation there from track to track really so much. So sometimes it's harder to get into. And here's another Pipa album, and there you get to see a little bit of what the instrument looks like. There's a good shot of it. I've seen this on TV somewhere, and I can't imagine where, but I recall seeing it. It was probably a PBS thing. Certainly be on YouTube. I love to watch the physicality of them playing these instruments as well. Quite lovely. And most of these CDs I'm showing are the more traditional-oriented albums. They're pretty much playing traditional pieces. I have a whole series of things where they use these instruments, but the people using them, create their own music and they blend in with other instruments, even in some cases synthesizers. But I wasn't going to show that this time around because this is already running longer than I intended. Now the first CD back. By the way, the Shanahachi is a Shanachi. This is an American label distributed here, so I was surprised that they picked up on something as obscure as this. Again, I'm pretty sure this is just a solo recital of Pipa music. But again, has a lot of. It's very much similar to the Japanese music in terms of the space. A lot of times it's just a live playing of this instrument, and there's not a lot of acoustic backing and instrumental backing. So there's a lot of kind of silence mixed in with the music, and sometimes it gets frantic, but it's lovely. And here's another one, signed by a female artist. Again, traditional, and the Ruan. It looks like, I'm not sure how you pronounce it. It's apparently the same instrument. I think it may be a lower in tone, like a lower tuning, like a tenor versus soprano or something like that, of the same instrument. One of the things I love about this music is the titles. High mountain flowing water, flute and drum at sunset, meandering stream from high mountains, stone forest nocturne, flying flowers touching the green, torch festival night, big waves surge toward the shore, the moon rising, longing for the Wee or Wye River. Yeah, this is kind of hard stuff to get into, and sometimes you get tired of hearing the same instrument. But if you're in the right frame of mind, you can put it on and just kind of phase out to it. Oops, I mixed this one in. Sorry, here's another one in the Japanese series. This is more of a good introduction, though, because it's a mixture of instruments. So you've got, one of the, I think that's the shamisen, the stringed instrument, and the shakuhachi, and the kodo, and I think that's a little bit of percussion. Shamisen, yeah, it says right on the cover there. So this is good because you get some instrumental colors mixed in there, not just one specific instrument. I did mix my stuff in here. Got another Japanese album, another None Such Explorer. Now this is one I have on vinyl as well. And again, this is various instruments. This isn't one that's tied. And this is probably the best way to start why, if you're not familiar with the music, why would you buy a CD that only has one instrument on it? This one must have been fairly popular because I have it on vinyl, and years later they bothered to put it out on CD. So this one has Kodo on it, shakuhachi, shamisen, bells even. So this is not, and none such, this would be very, this is probably still in print, I'm guessing. Sorry, I didn't mean to, I meant to separate all my Japanese and Chinese stuff. Here's erhu, one of my favorite instruments in the world. And this is, we're back to the land of China again. Erhu is essentially a two-stringed, I don't have a picture of it on here. It's a two-stringed violin, and it's playing in the background, but I doubt you can hear it, and I don't know how well you can see that. It's only a two-string violin, but it has, I'm willing to bet that you've probably heard it if you've ever watched any movie that's taken place in China. I don't know if it's the single most popular instrument, but it comes close to it. It's got depending on how you play it, and the sound quality changes. Here's a better picture of it. I actually have one that's not playable that I actually gave away to a friend. It's just got two strings, and it's bowed. It's got a small body. It doesn't weigh anything. The body is hollow, which makes the sound resonate, and it's actually covered like in a snake skin. And it's got a haunting quality. You can play it so it sounds a bit like a violin, but primarily, and I've never heard another instrument that sounds closer to a human voice. There's a certain way that you bow it, and it's beautiful. And there's a bowing technique involved. If you want to, you can make it sound very much like more of a female voice, but it can sound very much like a voice if you aren't paying attention, or if it's mixed in with other instruments and mixed low in terms of volume of the other instruments. It actually can sound like a female voice singing. It's got very vocal qualities to it, and it's very pretty. And I even have other modern CDs of it used, and especially if you process it, using modern technology like reverb and things like that. It has an absolutely beautiful, haunting sound. And I didn't pull out my CDs of things that are more modern, because this is I'm kind of sticking to the more traditional stuff here. And another Pippa album, P-I-P-A, which was the first thing that I was playing in the background, actually. Nice fat booklet. This isn't even the booklet that comes with the CD. There's a close-up of I guess it's got 4 strings, the Pippa. Yeah. I didn't even realize this is a 2 CD set. I wonder if I knew it at the time. Because I wonder, I might not have ever played the second CD. I didn't even realize there was a second CD in here until I pulled out the first one. Let's see. Huge, thick booklet. Oh, well, it's mostly, it's mostly Chinese. Yeah, mostly Chinese. But here there's some fantastic pictures in here. You do get a shot at seeing what the instrument looks like and how it's played on the fretboard. I would love to get my hands on some of these instruments and play them. And trust me, I'm sure I couldn't play it well, but just for the sake of picking up an instrument and playing something that, a sound comes out of it that you haven't heard for your entire lifetime. And I highly recommend this stuff. There's people in the VC are obviously very much open to listening to different kinds of music. And I'd say if you can listen to free jazz, you could probably listen to anything. But I don't know. There's something special if you're a music fanatic. I think most people almost owe it to yourself to delve a little bit into Japanese or Chinese traditional music. People in the VC know how to listen to music, unlike I think most people. people in VC know how to listen to music in more than one way. I think most people just listen to music for the rhythm and the vocal melody thing, and don't know how to listen to, more experimental music, or that there's more than one way to listen to music. And some of this stuff is just so lovely, including the thing I'm playing in the background now. I didn't mean to go on this long, so I guess it's a good thing I didn't pull out the other albums I have that have the other traditional Japanese and Chinese instruments on them. Highly recommend this stuff, and dipping your toes a bit into the water, especially if you're to the point maybe where you're not finding anything new that excites you, and you haven't dipped into these waters yet. Maybe a good place. Sometimes it's good quiet stuff too, to have to listen to when you're not sure what you want to hear, kind of thing. Okay, guys, I didn't mean for this to be an epic, so sorry about that. But I did have these pulled for about a week or so. Whatever. Hope everybody's having a great weekend. Hope you heard some of the music in the background and dug it a bit. And I will be back with my coffee very soon. Take care.